Hello, Chris Parker, Mercer Culinary, here with Nasco Education, talking a little bit about knife skills and the tools we use to perfect our knife skills. Knife skills is one of the most important tasks that we'll be learning in the kitchen, and it's one of the first tasks. So we have a variety of tools that we rely on to help us develop those perfect knife cuts that are the basis and fundamental of a lot of our cuisine. So what I have in front of me here are a couple of our different tools that we manufacture and have on hand to help you with those knife cuts. So featured here are our two stainless steel cut rulers. These feature the primary cuts that we're going to be working with. So everything from a fine dice, a fine brunoise, all the way up to a large dice, and includes also the straight cuts. We have our julienne, fine julienne, and bâtonnet as well. We also include a couple of the oblong cuts. We have our rondeaus, we have our tournées, and some other projects there. So these items are super useful when you're practicing, and they are of course included in the 13-piece knife set that is available on the website. What's also available as well is a 3D model. So if you have anybody who is a true 3D learner and wants to hold these items in their hands, these are perfect for learning them. So they come in a hard plastic box, and they feature all of the different cuts as 3D models as well. So useful for them. These are available. They come again in the kit. They have a couple of other items in there. There are some little guides that they can use with them. But these are all available to help your students learn how to practice those perfect knife cuts, and which we'll be getting into next. So when we start doing our knife cuts, the first thing we'll do is make sure that we peel and wash our vegetables so they're easy to use. We've got one of our peelers here. The process for peeling, again, is personal, but it's the safest, easiest way to do it is to make sure you're peeling away from yourself. I'm using the blade to peel the skin off the carrot, rotating with my fingers as I do this to make sure that we have all of that peel off of the carrot itself, so we can then begin doing our knife cuts. There's a variety of different uses for these peels. Some people save these and they put them in stock. You can compost them, but they certainly have a variety of applications once they are off of the carrot itself. For the technique of using the knives, it's obviously very important things that we want to be aware of. So I'm left-handed, so I may be backwards for a lot of you, but the general way I hold the knife and treat the product is going to be the same. So the first thing is gripping the blade itself. So for me, I use my bottom 3 fingers, I grasp the blade there, and then my thumb and 4 fingers will pinch over the blade itself. This is called like the pinch grip. This is very popular. This gives you maximum comfort, but also secures the blade in your hand, and it then becomes essentially an extension of your hand when you're using the blade. Your other hand, the most important thing to do, and this is really what sets professional cooks from those who are not professional cooks apart, is this sort of claw grip, the way that we hold our fingers when we're cutting through food. You may have watched videos or seen other people who can move very quickly when they cut through product, and by keeping their fingers curled back, this is what allows them to develop those skills to move quickly so that we can be efficient in the kitchen, and also allows us maximum control when we're doing that. Now, it takes some time to develop this skill, but the general idea of it essentially is thus. So when we're grasping product, whatever it is that we're holding, we adjust our fingers, but the idea is we curl our first joint of our fingers back, and we are resting the knife right up against the second set here. However, the business end, the sharp end of the blade, is well away from our fingers. So we are able to quickly and easily cut through product, but at no point is there any danger of me cutting myself because my fingers are well away from the knife edge of the blade itself, but I still have maximum control when I'm cutting or slicing through them. For a classic technique slicing, we're going to go tip to heel, and so the general process again is to go tip to heel, keeping our fingers curled back. We are controlling the knife edge with our leading hand here so that we get ourselves those uniform cuts, which are so important to our basic knife cuts there. This is where the practice comes in. Like anything new, it requires practice and time to develop those skills. But the basic technique is sound, and so whether you're cutting a thin carrot or an onion, we use the basic same techniques. For an onion, it's a similar idea. The way that I'll do it is I'll cut the end off like that, cut off both the ends. Try to cut off as little as possible, but I want to make sure I have a nice flat edge here for myself. And then the easiest way to be able to dice an onion is to think of this now as the globe, all right? So I have the edge here. This is where the onion comes together. This is the root edge. It all grows from this point here. And so what I'll do is I'll cut a line of longitude through it, north to south line, so I now have 2 halves to the globe. One of the big mistakes that I see when someone's cutting onions and learning how to do it for the first time is rather than cutting through the root edge, they just try to cut through the middle of the onion like if they're cutting through the equator of the globe, and when you start dicing it, the whole thing falls apart. Because it all grows from this portion here, the onion will stay together as you cut through it with the knife. So from there, I will peel the onion, and then I begin the actual dicing process. In this case, I have the root edge facing away from me, and then I use my fingers, as I mentioned before, and I will guide the knife. So we're going to say, let's do a fine dice here, so we're going to do about a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch dice. So I'm going to slice the knife through, tip into the knife, into the onion, and then I again use my fingers, dice it through like that. The secret to doing this well is to make sure you don't cut all the way through the onion, so you can see how I am not all the way through it. Continue to cut that together, and then the last part's a little bit tricky, so when you have students, have them just flip it around to just keep your hand out of the way. And then I do one off the top just to make sure that it is going to cut through there. And then using that thumb and forefingers, as we mentioned again, I'm going to hold the knife, the onion together, and again I'm going to guide it. So you see I'm keeping my fingers well away from the knife edge, guide it through it, and I give myself a nice dice of the onion. So that is the general process of doing that. The idea being is I give myself nice uniform cuts, because as we all know, uniform cuts equals uniform cooking, which is the goal with developing our knife skills there. But overall, the idea is to keep our fingers curled back with the knife resting against it so we can go and do all those cuts there. So as we're learning how to use the different types of knives in our kitchen, of course we need to learn how to use a bread knife as well. You've probably used one at home, but just to make sure you understand what we need to be doing to properly slice bread or loaves. This is a fairly soft loaf. It's got a nice crust on the outside to it, but again, the technique is really the same for other ones, but the biggest thing with bread knives is to make sure, because this is a nice sharp blade, is to try to draw through in as few strokes as possible. So what bread knives really allow you to do, essentially, is to start at the top and draw through quickly, and more or less in 1.5 strokes come right through it and back. That way, you get minimal loss, the bread isn't too torn up, and it's easy to cut from there. If we are producing sandwiches for hotline use, let's say we're slicing a sandwich before we send it out, just one quick slice through, and we're on our way out to do that. Bread knives, very straightforward, but important knives in the kitchen. Just making sure that you hold it correctly, slice through as clean and straight as possible with a minimum number of strokes. We don't want to be doing any sort of sawing action, and all of the bread knives that are out there really allow you to just go through in one clean slice with minimal sawing through it, which is really what we want to avoid. Is clean. We want clean, straight slices with our bread knives. So as we continue our discussion of knife skills, we basically have gone from how do we hold the knife, the prepper technique, generally speaking, how to do it. What we want to finalize here and really understand is the execution of the classic cuts themselves. So what we have is one of our cut rulers here. This again gives us the basic outlines and sizes, dimensions we're looking for with our cut shapes that we're working with. And then I have both a carrot and a pepper here, which are classic items that we would be using to produce these cuts. I want to bring together everything that we've discussed as far as how do we hold the knife, the slicing, the chopping, for the actual execution of the cut itself. Where we'll start here, we'll start with a bell pepper. And we will show you how we take this bell pepper, where we had a whole bell pepper here. I'm going to break it down real quick and give ourselves something to work with here. So bell peppers are a little trickier just because they are fairly oblong. So the way that I like to start is to cut off the top. We can reserve this and clean it out. It has applications. We can reserve the seeds and start a garden, or we can compost them. Generally speaking, we'll clean out the inside of it. Just give those a tap there, and we're left with that. Basically from there, you guys cut it up, clean it up, and you're left with the pepper itself. So what I like to do is to smash it down and get ourselves basically as straight a shapes as possible. You could trim this up a little bit more if you want, but because I want to get maximum use and utilization out of it, I will keep it in its more or less regular shape. The first thing that we want to execute here is a bâtonnet. So as you can see here, a bâtonnet is 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch by about 2 inches long. It's one of the first cuts that we would produce with that. So we can do this a couple of different ways. We can grab our cut ruler here, we can put it on our station, after it's been cleaned and sanitized, of course. We can measure using the ruler itself to make sure that we line up our cuts. So one of the easiest ways to do this is to flip this over so it's upside down, but I can still see the ruler top there and basically do my cuts just like that. So because I'm left-handed, I'm gonna do this a little bit backwards, but you get the general idea. And so I'm essentially lining this up to do my 1/4 inch slices. This is just to start. And as a student, you obviously want to start off and learn everything that you can do it, but over time you will be able to develop the skills to eyeball it so that we fit ourselves right through there. So our first stop here is to make sure that we have the width correct. And again, our cut ruler allows us to do that. We see that we are about 1/4 inch fitting right through there. We can do a little trim. And so we have that 1/4 inch by 2 inch bâtonnet cut, which is what we're looking for from there. Now, what's nice about these knife skills as you develop them is that it's kind of logical to see that a 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch by 2 inch, we could then cut this one more time at a 1/4 inch, and we have our small dice, which is what we'll do there. So again, using our cut ruler, we can find ourselves a 1/4 inch and just cut clean and straight through that. So now we have our perfect piece. We've got our 1/4 inch cube. And so one of the best ways to practice your knife skills is to find that perfect piece, leave it to the side of your cutting board, and then you want to make sure that all your cuts look like that. So we're using that as a reference, putting our knife through there and developing it so that as we develop these skills, we can see here that all of our cuts are basically that 1/4 inch square, which is what we're looking for. Again, using our fingers, guiding the knife, holding everything correctly there, and then utilizing the tools in front of us so that we can generate these uniform knife cuts with the goal essentially of being both uniform for even cook, presentation, and then also aesthetics on the plate itself. These all come together to give us a really important look on that. So that is how we do a bell pepper. So next up is going to be breaking down a cylindrical type product like a carrot. So in this particular case, we're gonna wanna produce a julienne, which is a 1/8 by 1/8 by 2 inch item, and then go from there to do the 1/8 cube brunoise. All right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut it to about 2 inches long so that I can execute that julienne. And the next thing that I wanna do is square off the carrot. I'm gonna find the very far edge of the carrot on one side, I'm gonna cut through it, and I give myself a flat edge to work with. This will make your knife cuts much, much easier to execute over time. There is a little bit of waste, but as your teachers will be able to tell you, as you know, there are stock applications, compost applications, anything we can do with our trimmings to make sure they are being utilized in the kitchen. Biggest thing though to make your life easy when you do this is to have a flat edge there. So we're gonna continue to do that flat edge around the outside of the carrot, so we end up with basically a box shape, a rectangular shaped item, so that we can easily execute that. So this is essentially what we're working with. We've got ourselves kind of a rectangular shape here that we are going to cut down. Now, because we are doing the julienne, we need 1/8 inch, which essentially is the second line there. So we've got to line that up there, and we'll go ahead and do one straight cut through there. So there is kind of a process that we call planks, then matchsticks or julienne, and then the actual dice itself. And again, I'm keeping my fingers curled back as I do this to give ourselves a series of those planks. Now we have these planks. They are all comparable depths because we've cut them the same thickness, essentially. And then we will move from there and we will cut the actual julienne shape. So again, fingers curled back, slicing through it, generating that 1/8 inch matchstick for that julienne that we were looking for. So we developed that, so we now have these nice straight matchsticks. And again, at any point, we can use our cut ruler to make sure that we are the proper dimensions. So these are a little bit long if we were trying to get the true 2 inch. So we'll cut a little bit off, but we see at this point, we have a very nice even side on it, and we have both the length and the width that are correct. So again, from there, to get ourselves that very nice fine brunoise, that 1/8 inch cube, we will trim it up just so that we get ourselves 2 inches. So we are technically correct there for our knife cuts. And then again, we take this one more step. So we've gone from planks. We are now at matchsticks here. We will do the final series of cuts that will get us into the actual cube form itself. So again, cut, cut, cut. And so the idea is, as you're doing that, they're all laid together and you have, but again, execution of the brunoise cut itself. And so that is the general process for it. Squaring off the vegetables, trimming it into the planks, trimming it into the matchsticks, and then into the actual fine brunoise or fine dice itself. It takes some work, it takes some practice, it takes time. And that's the biggest thing when it comes to learning and developing your knife skills, is taking the time to develop the skills, utilizing the tools you have in front of you to be able to do that as well. And so that is the general overall technique for executing this particular cut with a carrot.